And I'm back this time, but now as a moderator for a panel. I'm doing a million different hats for Sick Cells because I absolutely love Sick Cells and the work that we get to do. So this panel is on the policy implications of therapeutic development. Let me start by formally introducing myself. I know I've been talking to you guys all day as the resident Vanna White, and now you get to learn more about me and what it is that I do. As I said before, my name is Ryan Hill. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Indigo Hill Strategies. We are a boutique government affairs firm here in DC focused on healthcare, aging, and disability policy via the legislative and regulatory side. So we are doing a lot of really awesome, great work in this space, and we have the pleasure of working with Sick Cells as well. So our goal for the next 30 minutes is going to be to explore how policy really shapes the pace of innovation and advancement, why policy is such an important conversation when you're talking about therapeutic development, and really sort of what we hope to be for the future. And I'm joined by an all-star impeccable panel. So starting, we have Sarah Davis, who's the Vice President and Head of Patient Advocacy and Policy at Fulcrum Therapeutics. We have Annie Kennedy here in the middle, who is the Chief of Policy, Advocacy, and Patient Engagement at the Every Life Foundation for Rare Disease. And last but not least, we have Josh Trent, who is the CEO of Levitt Partners. We're so grateful that you guys could be with us today. I'm really excited for this panel. So let's start by really grounding ourselves in the big picture. When we talk about therapeutics development, particularly for rare diseases and sickle cell, policy plays such a huge role in thinking about what is even possible. When we think about sort of what's the Trump administration has done, what the Biden administration has done, what Trump 1.0 has done, there's a lot of work that I think we can parse through. Annie, I'm going to start with you. How would you describe the current policy and regulatory environment for therapeutic development for rare disease, but especially sickle cell?
So we're going to start off with a really light question to get this panel started.
Let's keep it light and fun over here.
So I should say that I skew optimistic and a little sarcastic sometimes. But I've all year been describing the environment as dynamic, I think is the word that I would use, which is true. It has been a really dynamic environment this year. But I think with regard to rare disease, never more has rare disease been a hot topic than it has been in 2025. And that's a direct result of the engagement of our patient communities. And so we are in an advantage, and it's up to us to optimize that advantage. That as this administration came in and as we had a lot of new leadership coming in, that we had their captive attention and that we have seen lots of new potential pathways coming in. One announced last night that we can dig into. We have seen lots of opportunities for engagement and rich engagement with patient communities. We've seen pilot programs in rare diseases. We've seen new approvals in rare disease therapies. We're seeing this administration try and answer questions around not just how do we solve for more common rare diseases, but how do we solve for N of few and ensure that there are going to be pathways for those diseases as well. And while there are so many questions yet to be answered, and so many questions about how do all of these pathways work together, how do patients continue to engage, and ensure that not just that there are seats at the table, but ensure that these remain our tables. What remains undeterred, what has not changed in this dynamic environment, is that rare is central in all of these conversations. Mm-hmm. And that was not the case 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. So I think just to set the tone for this conversation, that's a direct result of the engagement of the people in this room and so many others who've ensured that we are the top of mind for members who are making policy decisions and are being elected into office.
Annie, I'm so happy we started with you. to bring a level of optimism. So I thank you for that and for grounding in what's happening. So I'm really grateful for that. And I know the audience is as well. Josh, in addition to being CEO of Levitt Partners, you also lead the Sickle Cell Disease Partnership. So for those of you who may be unfamiliar, it's a really fantastic group that brings together both private sector companies that are interested in sickle cell development, public organizations, and also CBOs. And so from that viewpoint, Josh, I think that you have a really great perspective on what's going on. What are you watching from a federal or agency perspective? And what are you watching that you feel like is influencing the pace of therapeutic development?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'll just start and say it's a privilege to be with you. Thanks for having me. Sick Cells was a founding member of the Sickle Cell Disease Partnership, and I'm grateful to do this work. It's been some of the most rewarding work I've been part of the last few years. To your question about what I'm seeing that's kind of influencing the administration and what for sickle cell, obviously this administration came in with the secretary and Dr. Oz both having strong statements about sickle cell through their confirmation process, continuity on that CMS access model, which I think you all probably covered earlier today in some of your conversations. And yet it has been a very dynamic environment with a lot of change of personnel and evolving priorities. And I think to Annie's point, part of what has been a highlight this year has been the sickle cell community keeping its priorities top and kind of first. I think one challenge is anytime there's a lot going on in Congress, Congress can do big things, but only a few things at one time. And so the reconciliation process crowded out a lot of bipartisan work. The Sickle Cell Disease Partnership, we've been working on a bipartisan, bicameral piece of legislation which would save money by keeping people with sickle cell out of the hospital. It incentivizes state Medicaid programs to create a coordinated care model. It's built on a very successful health home model that has worked in about 30 different states and been very successful. But it is work to kind of remind people that not only this is important, but hey, Congress, here's the work that you need to take and the next step to keep it moving forward. So I think we all kind of live in an attention economy, and Congress is probably the tip of the spear for attention economy. So we're doing work to see that kind of move forward. I think there have been some good improvements when you think about some of the work that was done. Reconciliation has a lot of changes to Medicaid, which is really important for sickle cell Americans with sickle cell disease. A lot of concern about what that unfolds, and we don't know yet because we haven't seen a lot of that unfold. There was some policy included that improves incentives for rare disease research. I think that's positive over the longer term. And to Annie's point, a lot of activity from the administration that wants to be helpful in sickle cell, and yet there's so much further that we have to go together.
Yeah. I really like the idea of, we've come so far and we have a lot further to go together. I think that together is the really important piece to focus on there. If I could put just a quick plug in for you guys to visit Sick Cells' website. We've done a lot of writing this year, a lot of engaging with the administration, a lot of reaching out to Dr. Oz, who leads the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, outreach to RFK Jr., the Secretary for Health and Human Services, and several letters outlining our positions to congressional leaders as well. It's really important that, that we as advocates, continue to share our messages. And to Josh's point about the attention economy, it's exactly right. They're getting a lot of emails, right? They're getting a lot of letters, a lot of outreach, a lot of meetings, but it's just as important that your voice is a part of that coalition. And so we did excellent work on these letters. I'm very biased because I think they're beautiful and perfect. So please look. Okay, Sarah, question for you. From your perspective in the industry at Fulcrum, how are companies navigating this policy environment to keep innovation moving forward?
So I want to thank Ashley and the Sick Cells teams for inviting me to speak today. I also have to give a shout out because after Jesse and Dr. Allen and Dr. Wiley Smith, I feel like I'm on a Fulcrum high. I have to tell
that's
you.
right.
So, my primary focus at Fulcrum in my role is to really ensure that the patient voice is central to how we think about therapeutic development, policy, and access. So when we talk about sickle cell policy, I think we're really talking about the intersection between innovation and equity, how emerging therapies can reach the patients who need them most, and how policy can either enable that or limit that progress. So innovation in rare disease is moving faster than ever, as you spoke about, and sickle cell, I think, is a pure example of that. The recent gene therapy approvals were really exciting and have built up momentum, but we also saw some of the challenges with those therapies when we think about cost and access. So with about half or a little more of the sickle cell community relying on Medicaid for access, I think it really brings another fresh look on how we look at treatments for sickle cell disease. So at Fulcrum, we're really focused on, as you've heard several times, an oral small molecule therapy. And we think that by having that as an option, we are creating more access and a scalable option so that it could be not only in the U.S. but global. That means that we're thinking from the start about how this approach can work in real-world environments like community hospitals, like academic centers, and day units where a lot of the sickle cell care actually happens. So navigating today's environment requires collaboration, so engaging with regulators and payers and advocates as early as possible so that as science advances, access also keeps pace with innovation.
Thank you, Sarah. I want to just, drill down on one thing that you said, which is that you guys are focused on therapeutic developments that are accessible and scalable. And it sounds like you guys are doing a really great job of keeping pace with what is available via the administration and having your finger on the pulse. I just want to connect that dot for the audience is that, there are what I like to call sort of regulatory breadcrumbs that you get from the administration, and it's sort of agnostic of who leads the administration. And so you can use those breadcrumbs via the proposed rules that they put out, via guidance, regulatory guidance, sub-regulatory guidance, to figure out where they want to go and to make sure that you're keeping pace. So thank you for that. Why don't we shift a little bit to, I think, the heart of the discussion when it comes to why we're here today, which is how policy meets people. We talk a lot about patient advocacy, and that patient advocacy has really become one of the most powerful forces that are shaping therapeutic development. We heard on several different panels today just that sentiment. We know that advocacy feels like is influencing every stage of the pipeline. Sarah, I'll stick with you for this one from the industry perspective. We heard a few times today that Fulcrum, often emphasizes patient advocacy. Patient advocacy is in your title, even. Yes. Early in development. Can you talk a little bit about how you're seeing patient voices shape regulatory and policy decisions before approval?
Sure. So we engage with the community very early, so with patients and caregivers.
Your microphone.
There you go. Okay. Yeah, so we really engage with the patient and caregiver community very early in the process. As you saw, we have an early clinical trial. We have a community council that actually looks at our protocols and synopsis as we develop our therapeutics. And we've had conversations that have been pretty interesting and eye-opening. And to provide an example, it's like that transition from pediatric to adult care. So learning that when that happens, sometimes there's barriers to access and adherence. So we're really focusing on developing our trial strategy to address those options. We also think proactively about payers and the regulatory expectations so that when our therapy becomes ready, we're not creating additional barriers. That an oral therapy like ours, we're hoping, can, create more access where some complex therapies or treatment centers or complex therapies that require treatment centers are not an obstacle for us. So ultimately, equitable access starts in early development, by listening and creating with the sickle cell community, we can make sure that innovation doesn't just exist, but it creates a path forward.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Annie, next question for you. Every Life has worked to really put data behind advocacy, to use data to tell stories. How does that kind of data and evidence change how policymakers view coverage, reimbursement, sort of all the things that we're talking about in development?
Yeah. So we are an evidence-based policy organization. And so what that means is as therapies are coming, we'll go with therapies because that's what we're talking about. As therapies are coming through the pipeline, one of the things that we've been hearing a lot is as you're working to navigate through access is there is a lot of fear on the part of payers that it's not so much just paying for your therapy, that's the fear, but that there's this fear. And literally I've sat on panels where the title of the panel was The Tsunami of Rare Disease Therapies That Were Coming. And I thought, God, I wish there were this tsunami of rare disease therapies that were coming.
Is a tsunami in a room with us?
Right. Because we wouldn't have to talk about how to incentivize therapy development in rare. But there is this fear, right, from payers that if we create a coverage paradigm for sickle cell, then how many other therapies are going to be coming that we're going to have to reimburse? Or if we reimburse therapies that go through the accelerated approval pathway, what will that look like for every other therapy that we have to reimburse? So what we've done is we've done a lot of evidence collection to try and dispel some of those fears and some of those myths so that we can then pair that with the actual data and experiences of the patient community and then be meeting, in this case, with payers to help sort of take some of that fear out of the room so then we can have real conversations about coverage decisions. So I'll give you some examples. We actually funded a study that looked at what the actual impact on Medicaid programs had been for all therapies that had gone through the expedited pathways that were orphan products on Medicaid plans. So what actually was the Medicaid impact for all orphan therapies? And what we found was through 2022, so up until that period, that was the data that had been released, the actual fiscal impact was 0.7% of the Medicaid drug spend.
Wow.
Less than 1%.
Wow.
So we're not scorching the earth in Medicaid drug spend. So then what we heard from payers was, okay, well, that's all fine and good, but we're looking at the pipeline and we see what's coming and we're really afraid of what's coming. Because again, there's this tsunami of therapies coming. So we then partnered with NewDigs and we did what's called a pipeline analysis modeling. So we did forecasting. So again, we could get some data so we could go to payers and say, let's actually talk about coverage models that are going to make sense, that are going to clear the path. So we did forecasting through 2033, and we did modeling to look at, based on everything that was in clinical trials in 1, 2, and 3 phases, so phase 1, 2, and 3 trials, what was anticipated to be approved through 2033, and what the fiscal impact would be of those products on the environment. Now, we didn't just look at those in isolation. We looked at it by community. So we understand that if you have SMA, you're not just getting the cell and gene therapy, you're now getting that in combination with another therapy. So we looked at it through the lens of what does that delivery actually look like for the patient. So again, we could have really sophisticated conversations with the payers. And what we found through this pipeline analysis modeling, and trust me, it's not Annie Kennedy doing the modeling. We're really working with very sophisticated modelers and health economists. But most importantly, a part of this was we worked with the patient communities whose products and disease spaces we were talking about. So we could understand what would impact the adoption rates, what would impact the communities wanting to take these products so that the model would be informed directly by those patient communities. And the sickle cell community was one of the communities that participated and really helped inform this model because, as you can imagine, new products are in the pipeline and anticipated to be approved through 2033 for sickle cell disease. And what we found through this study, and all of these are published, was that we anticipate that there will be 45, on average, 45 new products, which doesn't sound like a lot to me, but that's what we anticipate, that will be approved through 2033. It actually doubles the number of products approved in rare disease. And that means there will be about 26,000 individuals living with rare diseases who will be eligible for therapies who aren't today. But most importantly, what it amounts to is less than 1% of the annual burden of rare disease. So again, when we talk to payers, what we say is it already is costing money. We're just misspending it. But instead, let's invest it in the therapies that are going to be approved. And so we can have a very different kind of conversation when we have this data. And so those are the kinds of studies that we're doing. We're actually doing a study right now with Levitt and with Josh and his team. And Josh just talked about, we're really concerned about what's going to be happening to Medicaid right now. And so we're actually doing a study to understand, what does Medicaid eligibility, what is the rare disease community's profile of Medicaid eligibility look like throughout the U.S.? And we're doing this understanding down through congressional district, who's living in congressional districts with which diagnosis, what was the Medicaid eligibility pathway, so that we can work with members of Congress to try and protect Medicaid eligibility as we see new implications and new rollout of some of these new Medicaid provisions. So that's the power of data, but it's only powerful when it's informed by the community and then paired with the experience of the community. So it requires all of us going out and taking this data and then pairing it with your lived experience to deliver it to the right policymakers at the right time.
Thank you for the work that you're doing. I will say I cannot wait to get my hands on that congressional level data for Medicaid. That data and the numbers are just such an important part of painting the picture for folks, right? Like, you can make an argument all you want to, but if someone can foresee that argument as anecdotal, then it doesn't have as much power. And so I just want to thank you on behalf of everyone in the room, but also the community, for the work that you guys are doing. And we're really grateful to have that. And please, as soon as it's out, I can't wait to see it. Josh, I'll end this round of questions with you. From a systems and payer perspective, what do you think the policy barriers are that still slow down equitable access to therapies once they exist?
It's a great question. There's been a lot of focus in Congress and states on prior authorization. It's an important tool for health plans, and it's often an overused tool for health plans. And it's particularly challenging often when patients have been on therapy for a long time and change plans, or change their location, something simple like that, and can't get access to the medicines they need. So I think prior authorization, the good news is Congress is more sensitized to it being a pain point, but it remains a challenge. I think also for state Medicaid programs and preferred drug lists remain a challenge. Sick Cells has done some work in the past, maybe last 5 years or so, looking at some of the challenges, and it really comes back to your point, Annie, marrying the evidence, what's a state's policy, with the experience, where does the community engage, and that evidence and experience is really powerful on preferred drug lists and prior authorization. And those things exist for a reason. They need to exist for a reason. But I think one of the challenges with rare disease broadly, and with sickle cell in particular, is sometimes you'll have someone making a decision that doesn't know.
Right.
They don't know what they don't know. They're there because they want to help. They're good people. They're mission driven. They want to help. They care about improving health in the United States. But they don't understand the implications sometimes of a particular issue, or they may face other constraints. And so that's where the relationship as advocates to build a relationship with them that's long-term, that understands the world they're operating in, is very, very powerful and can help them be effective over the longer term. And I think to Annie's point, when you're bringing the data to bear, you can help them understand sometimes where you're spending money that you don't even realize you're already spending, and you're worried about this thing over here, but it's like, hey, this is the baseline. So let's think about how do we address that and promote health long term. Those are some of the things that come to mind at the moment.
Yeah, those are excellent. I will also just add to your point of the importance of building relationships, right? And people genuinely don't know what they don't know. And, to take from Annie's optimism, I would say that, we always assume that that people are not malintentioned, that they just don't know. And so we have at Sick Cells an annual policy forum, and the day 2 of the policy forum is a virtual Hill Day. And so we have advocates and warriors and their caregivers from all across the country meeting with, doing hundreds of meetings with with congressional staff from both parties from around the country. And one thing that we heard as we were, doing our debrief with some of the advocates was, the staff were nearly in tears hearing some of these stories. They just didn't know, right? We had a few meetings in which the member of Congress popped into the meeting, and they were able to hear directly from the warrior, from the advocate, from the caregiver, why the policies that Josh mentioned earlier are really important, why funding sickle cell disease research is so important. So it really behooves us to make sure that we are out front on these issues and educating as much as possible, because people don't know, and you would be surprised.
And I might just add a little color to make that practical. For a Medicaid director, the average tenure for a Medicaid director is a year and a half. A year and a half. And if you're running a Medicaid program, you're running about 1/4 of a state's budget integrated. So by nature, if you have a rare disease, that is going to be a small percentage of the big things you're working through, contracts with your hospitals, with your managed care plans, big coverage decisions on other issues. It is going to be hard to get that bandwidth. And that's where, again, the relationship helps. And then if you think about, we had a member of Congress tell us, you got to think about it this way. Members of Congress live their day in 15-minute increments.
Yep.
And there's about 20 of them. And they go back to back to back to back to back to meetings, and they go from energy to housing policy to healthcare on to national defense, down to Aunt Sookie and what she needs for her annual fundraiser for some charitable thing they're doing in their district. And they have a breakfast, and they have a lunch, and they have a dinner. And by the way, after that, they got to call their wife and see how their wife's doing, or their kids or whatever. They just live these very kind of fragmented lives in terms of issues and themes. So building that, that's where kind of like it takes multiple bites at an apple to kind of break through and kind of build up knowledge. I always tell people that working on Congress for a decade, you assume positive intent, to your point, Ryan. People come to solve problems and help people, but they don't always understand what if they're focused on the right problems and what actually helps people. And that's where the education comes in.
Absolutely. And Josh, you triggered me a little bit running down the day. I do not miss being a congressional staffer. So why don't we, as we close, I want to look ahead. I want to ask each of you this question. In one sentence, what gives you optimism about the future of therapeutic development? Wants to go first? Well, Josh, why don't we have you go first? Optimism.
Since therapeutic development is about science, and science involves a lot of math, I'll give you an equation. Science plus commitment plus community plus advocacy equals great potential.
I love that. Love that. Great. Scared when you talk about math, but it was great.
I'm a humanities major. That's as close as I'll get.
Annie, optimism.
So I've been working in this space for a long time. And it used to be when we would talk about therapeutic development, we always were talking about like hope on the horizon, therapies that we sort of dreamt of, things that we hoped would someday happen. And I think what I'm really optimistic about and what's different about it now is we're talking about more improvements, better, additional communities benefiting, but we're sitting in the room with people who are experiencing hope realized. So what we're talking about is improving on the promise of therapeutic development, not the hope on the horizon. So what we need are second generation therapies, combination pharma, and cures, not just treatments. And we can actually now say the word cures. For a long time, we never said that word. That to me is what gets me out of bed every morning.
Thank you, Annie. Sarah?
So what really is encouraging for me is the collaboration. I mean, we look in this room and we have industry, we have advocacy, we have policymakers. And to me, that collaboration has really grown since I first started in this space. So that is really encouraging. But what gives me optimism, I'd say, is that growing sense of shared accountability. The science is advancing. The advocacy voice is stronger than ever. And there's a real recognition across sectors that we have to move forward together. So that collaboration, if it's grounded in trust and transparency, I think ultimately there'll be progress. So that's very encouraging to me.
Thank you. That's beautiful. Why don't we give our panelists a round of applause? Thank you.